So for this week's Digital Minimalism Journey Through Lent video, I was really excited to get to sit down with Jil Novenski and Colin Wulff, both of whom are involved in religious education. Colin is our Assistant Director of Religious Education here at the Fourth Universalist, and Jil is the Director of Religious Education at the Community Church of New York, which is another UU church here in town. And we talked about work-life balance. So I'd encourage you to stick around to hear a little bit about how we balance this digital in the COVID age and how minimalism is helping me face up to some of those challenges. I hope you stay tuned and enjoy the video. Thanks for joining for this latest in our minimalism journey through Lent series, specifically digital minimalism that we're looking at. And one of the biggest challenges of this COVID time is that it's been really hard to practice any sort of digital minimalism when your entire job seems to be online. And so I am joined today by our Assistant Director of Religious Education, Colin Wulff, as well as Jil Novenski, who is a Director of Religious Education over at Community Church in New York. And so we're going to talk a little bit about work-life balance and maybe some of my strategies that have been working for digital minimalism, but really just about the challenges that we face right now in this COVID digital age. So Colin, you are an assistant director as well as you do some acting as well, and that has been a field that's been really hit and had a really strange work relationship during these times. So can you tell us a little bit about what work-life balance has been like for you during COVID?
Yeah. Um, Committing professionally to an artistic field already kind of conflates categories like that. The creative sustenance side starts to bleed over into the kind of industrial hitting the pavement of scrolling through job listings and memorizing monologues. And so there's already the kind of subjective pleasure element is under threat from professional necessity. And so put that medium online on the same devices where you are already consulting your email inboxes and your correspondences. And it becomes an even more rigorous task to draw those sorts of boundaries. And I will admit to not always drawing them very successfully. And part of that is I have a compulsion to have kind of a clean slate heading into each evening, and so I don't. It doesn't actually help me relax more to put off an email until the next day. So I do tend to be very responsive to work-related notifications already. But yes, the theater industry. I know almost nobody in the theater world who would indefinitely prefer this means of storytelling and conveying our craft, but I have been pretty impressed by some of the ingenuity that the limitations have catalyzed. So I think that in some respects that transfers over to my work in this position as assistant director of religious education here. There are programs and series and creative inquiries that I'm making out of the necessity of wanting to keep programming strong and our educational offerings strong in this context that I'm not sure it would have occurred to me to pull together if it had been a matter of drawing everybody to a single location, and finding a space that was shared, and dealing with the transit. And so in some ways, it has become clearer and clearer how to make use of those limitations for creative ends.
Colin, I totally share your compulsion challenge. I have the same exact compulsion. Before going to sleep, I like to start with a clean slate. So for me, putting off answering an email is actually a stressor. So then the challenge becomes, do you check the emails? Do you just not, do you ignore it? What do you do? So those boundaries have been really, really tough to employ. Um, but besides being a director of religious education for me, I'm also a single mom. I have a teenage son and he's going to school remotely and just beginning early college classes alongside his 11th grade work and trying to fill out internship applications and all of these things. So using the technology in all these different ways and trying to humanly connect has definitely been a challenge in a lot of ways. And at the same time, it's kind of lovely for me in terms of work-life balance. I notice that because I'm home all the time, that I'm somebody who likes to always be useful in doing things that are productive. And I don't like being stuck to one task. So the fact that I'm home means that in the 10 minutes that I'm not Zooming, I can be cooking a meal. I could be going to fetch a load of laundry. Like for me, that's actually satisfying. So while for some that might sound like super blurred boundaries, for me, I feel more productive and gives me a little bit more of an opportunity in the evening, potentially to just look at the planets, which I'm seeing for the first time since COVID. I don't think on 42nd Street I live, and I've never seen planets out my window. So that's pretty cool.
But I think, it is the email. The email is a challenge. So that is one thing that I set as like a specific rule for this digital minimalism journey, is that I have 30 minutes during a specific 4 hours. So like 8 to 9, noon to 1, 4 to 5, and then I just have night as a general category. And so I have 2 hours that I can spend answering emails, which is plenty enough time to answer most emails. But I was finding that like the second I woke up, I was looking at my email to see if there was a work email at 6 o'clock in the morning, and like, did I really need to write back and tell them the answer at 6 o'clock? I definitely was facing that compulsion. So that's definitely been an area where it has been good for me to have kind of a little bit stricter rules with this digital minimalism. But I think that there is a sense that at the same time, I don't want to sound too much of like the entrepreneur bro YouTuber world, but like the idea of workflow, I feel like my workflow is better than what it would have been in person, where I would be having to deal with commutes, with figuring out locations. Whereas now I can be like, ooh, like here's my list of tasks. Like, okay, I can help with the kids' homeschool. I can help cook lunch. I can help with the dishes. I can do some laundry. I can look outside. I can go on a walk. Like, I think the workflow is better because it's not like a set time, but that really can become a challenge when it's that same temptation that we face with like social media addiction to just look at your phone because there might be some new work thing that you don't want to miss out on. And I mean, Colin, especially, you have to deal with me messaging you all the time. So I'm part of the problem in the email world. But as far as like acting, like there is maybe a sense of also like urgency, like, oh, I might miss something if I'm not like actively looking or watching my email. Do you think that that's like the case, that it makes it even more compulsive?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the rites of passage of a developing performer is to hopefully acquire representation, and then that outsources some of the job search process. But it also means that there is a real professional expectation that you be responsive to time-sensitive job opportunities. There are self-tape submissions. You have to confirm within a certain amount of time that you will be, before COVID times, in a particular room at a particular time on a particular day. And now it's that you will have such a file uploaded to this particular site at this particular time. And yeah, there are, there's that, we get into that headspace where probably this job isn't going to be the one, but any of them could be. And it feels like you are at a crucial career and creative juncture every time you decide to pass something over for the sake of short-term sanity and and relaxation. Now,
I have to say, since the beginning of time that I've worked and emails were a thing, and I recognize, Colin, that you don't, I like just holding that your situation as an actor and as a performer, that's a big deal. Like, I totally get that. And I don't know what the workaround could possibly be for that. So boundaries must be really tough in that situation. But for me, since the beginning of time that I've worked and emails were a thing, I've made a point of letting every employer know I don't do work emails on my phone. I make sure that my phone there's no work things that I do on my phone, other than answering a phone call or a text if there's something that has to happen that way, but no emails or other business. And that's been really helpful. It's just sort of, at least I know that there's like one device, but it's kind of feels strange to say that in the face of what you just had to share, Colin, because obviously that is not your reality. And I understand that. And I definitely don't know what to say about that, because that's a very real truth. I mean, obviously you want to catch the moment. So I get that.
Well, and I would like to actually applaud Colin, because in my early days, I was, so eager to like be the top person and be on top of every single communication that came in, that it was, everybody knows that Ember will get back right away. And so anytime like I had a thought, I'd be like texting Colin like oh, here's a list of things, and then Colin said, you know what, if it's work related, please email it to me. And I was like, you know what, that's actually a really good call. And it got me thinking about how I was handling my own work communication. So Colin, you are partially inspiring as to my own habit changes in the last 6 months, because I found that I was doing this like with having work email on my phone, so which is easier now that I have a flip phone. I don't have email on it at all, but having work email on my phone meant that I expected everybody else to do the same thing, and that they would all also get back to me in like 20 minutes, just like I was getting back to them. And like that's not healthy expectations to be placing either way. Like, it needs to be healthy relationships, especially in this all digital space.
1,000% high five to the colleagues that remind us about boundaries. I will say that in this Zooming stage where we're all like meeting on screen with different people, and that circle is allowed to widen because it is virtual, I have noticed a lot of colleagues, and I've really been grateful for those that remind me, you should be taking 2 days off in a row. You should be, just reminding me of all the ways that they employ boundaries has been really useful. I can't promise that I've paid attention to all of it and employed all of it, but it is, those are really great reminders, actually. And it also feels like as community, we're working together kind of in self-care with each other, trying to remind each other to employ self-care. So that's really cool, useful.
And some of that request was the convenience of the paper trail, of course, but some of it was also knowing my own susceptibilities to that particular medium. In fact, in the last video that we shared on digital minimalism, Ember, I admitted to texting being a weakness of mine. I'm pretty good about the online social media platforms, of which I have very few and very little contact, but texting one-on-one with people who are close to me is something that I can get lost in very quickly. Sometimes even texting myself an email as a reminder about a longer project. Just the other day, I was backing up some of those texts to myself, and one of them began, to put it succinctly, and then there was 4 pages worth of text that had meant to be just like a single summary of something that I'd been mulling over, a debate I'd been having with myself all day. So I get lost in that vortex really quickly, and knew that I needed to shield both of us from that tendency of mine.
I think that's the big thing about really any form of minimalism is that if it becomes just a rule, like, oh, you only need to have 10 possessions, then that kind of maybe is missing the point. Whereas it is more about setting boundaries, making sure we have this space, that we recognize where our limitations are. So for me, and as Colin and I discussed in our previous video, for me, I knew that the social media was an addiction problem, that if I wasn't very proactively setting limits, I was easily spending like 4 hours on my phone a day. And that wasn't a useful use of my time. Even if I, as work started and I was doing a lot of social media stuff at work, then I'm like, I'm promoting things for work. That is why I'm on social media so much. And so now that I've just logged out of all my social media besides like the accounts for work, like it really, yeah, I am using it a lot less. I'm not when I'm just promoting stuff for work. But it's identifying minimalism is less about, here's the specific rules that everybody needs to follow, but what is going to help you minimize the distractions in your life. I think that that's important for us all to be thinking about in like this time of constantly online and people expecting you to constantly be available work time during COVID.
Yeah, I've been looking a lot when we were talking about minimalism before we were talking in this space. In Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, like a lot of times it feels like the challenges that we're facing now are just as human and same as any of the challenges we've ever faced. AKA, my computer desktop looks like my walk-in closet used to look. So, it's like the same exact issue, just like placed in a device over the closet itself. Because now I'm not getting changed all the time to go places and come from places, but I am certainly doing similar behavior on my desktop. And I was looking at the Four Noble Truths, and I was thinking, well, if you're looking toward the fourth, which you're trying to find the path to the end of suffering, then already inherently, then the first must be in effect. You must understand that there's some suffering, whether consciously or not. You're looking for the fourth, so and then the second, this idea of craving. And I've been for a long time thinking about letting go and what that means, just on totally other levels that don't have to do necessarily with technology. But like letting go can't happen until you recognize what it is you're hanging on to. And now I'm beginning to connect that with the second noble truth. And I'm starting to connect that with this minimalist idea and this time of COVID, and how, I'm grateful, I guess, that we do have more quiet time in our minds. I'm not riding a shuttle bus every single day. I'm not piling through midtown traffic of people who are just tired and overworked every day to and from. That bit of time on the front and back end of every day gives my brain some quiet peace to even mold these concepts. So it is interesting to think about, like, how do you identify the suffering? Because sometimes the suffering is just the nagging feeling that you needed to answer an email. There's some suffering there, So it's interesting to try to employ these Four Noble Truths. What does that look like?
Definitely. Colin, go ahead. I see you. You unmuted
No,
there.
I was just, that it got me thinking about in a recent reflection, our senior minister, Reverend Schuyler, mentioned the distinction between sacred and ordinary time, and how those two divisions aren't necessarily cleanly applicable to this new space. But it did get me thinking about kind of the repetitious cosmogony of the apartment space as the whole universe, and how every day we repeat the rituals of that first day when we realized we were sort of bound there for a while. And connecting that to the digital minimalism idea of every communication coming into a device from without that space is something without the universe that's so alien, that is a bombardment of of something that is foreign to this cosmos, and that I can decide how, which things to admit and when to investigate, when to answer those calls, and I fail, but it's the spiritual metaphor that most frequently occurs to me when my little screens light up with that solicitous blue is that idea of our worlds are of necessity bounded and complete, at the same time, indefinite and confining.
I think first step to everything is turn notifications off. That's just sort of my takeaway right now. That would be my very first step to going into minimalism.
Well, though you did mention the desktop, when I switched from a laptop to an iPad, I got more storage because like, oh, I'm probably gonna need more storage. But mostly because these video files are large, which is a fair reason. But I as I was leaving the laptop, I just took like all these folders and like copied them all into one folder, but I'm like, I don't know what documents are even in any of these other folders. Like I had always like kept it clean, but it's just keeping it clean by just moving it into random piles, just like I do in real life. And so one of my things with this minimalism challenge, as well as just with this iPad, is that at the end of every month, beginning of the new month, whatever makes more sense time wise, that I delete the last month's worth of things that I have built in alarms that I have set, apparently. I don't know why I have an alarm going off at 5 o'clock. I don't even remember.
Right on time.
See, look at the flip phone is there for us. But that, you know, we want to hold on to these things so much. And like, yes, there's some things that we definitely should, but like what can we let go of in like our digital spaces that we're holding on to a Word document from 2004 on our computers? Do we really need that document anymore? Is another simple way to practice some minimalism. Go through and delete a bunch of old photos and files. Maybe if, and in my case, my 4-year-old son has happened to taken about 3,000 burst pictures and filled up our iPads with photos. You know, so go through and delete all of those. It helps to clear that space out sometimes.
Just a little. I mean, I feel like definitely taking ownership of what it is that we're hanging on to is useful in being able to get to the step of letting go. I also think like being human, I think the reticence to let go is us not necessarily recognizing what is the value. Like it doesn't seem to be enough as humans that we recognize there's some suffering there, because we'll take some nagging of ourselves. It's fine. But honestly, I was reading something that Rabbi Heschel said, which was that the reason he's still alive at the time, I can't remember when that interview was, but the reason that, you know, what keeps him alive is that he is always able to be surprised. And that when he hears this phrase that there's nothing new under the sun, that he actually thinks there's nothing stale under the sun. I think if we we could see some value in being able to avail ourselves of surprise, if we are not always tuning in or feeding the wolf that is our craving to answer to those who are reaching out, that, you know, we don't necessarily have to be reaching back to immediately. And then we can kind of leave ourselves open for living in the light of awe, which would be great. more of that, please. You know.
Well, I think we have had some real wisdom in this conversation, some good truth nuggets dropped. I don't know, whatever terminology you want to use. But Jil, Colin, I want to say thank you to both of you for taking the time to record this with me. It's wonderful to get to have this chat with both of you and to think about how we balance this work-life world.
Yep, no laptops or cell phones at the Bodhi tree.
Thank you, Ember.
By the way.